A nurse lost her job, her purpose, and her mom, all in 1 week. Then a stranger she fed sent a limo for her. Make sure you're subscribed. This isn't just about a nurse or a stranger. It's about what happens when you lead with your heart. Alina sat on the edge of her hospital bed, staring at the crumpled envelope in her hands. She had seen the words before, "Thank you for your service," but today they felt like a betrayal. She had worked tirelessly, saved lives, and endured sleepless nights, only for one quiet mistake to unravel everything. The pressure of grieving her mother's death had finally caught up with her. The exhaustion had clouded her judgment during a crucial moment, and that was enough to seal her fate. She hadn't realized how broken she was, how the weight of loss had affected every aspect of her life. Now she was unemployed with no clear direction. Her mother, the one person who had always supported her, was gone. The loss was still fresh, and the emptiness inside her felt unbearable. Alina had been a nurse for 5 years, and yet she felt like a stranger to herself. What was she supposed to do now? Her hands shook as she placed the letter aside, the reality of her situation sinking in. With no plan and no purpose, Alina grabbed her bag and left the apartment. The world outside seemed loud and indifferent, a stark contrast to the quiet despair she carried within. She wandered aimlessly, her mind clouded with thoughts of regret and sorrow, until she found herself standing in front of a small cafe on the corner of a busy street. The scent of fresh coffee and baked goods drifted through the open door, offering a brief moment of solace. Without thinking, she stepped inside. The warm, comforting atmosphere of the cafe felt like a temporary escape, even though she knew it wouldn't last. Alina made her way to the counter and ordered a cup of coffee, her eyes scanning the room for a place to sit. Her gaze fell on a homeless man sitting near the window, his clothes ragged and his face covered in a layer of grime. He was holding a paper cup, asking for spare change, but the cafe employees were not having it. A barista approached him, speaking sharply. "You can't sit here without buying anything. You need to leave." Alina watched in silence as the man's shoulders slumped. He looked tired, beaten down by a world that had long since forgotten him. He didn't argue. He simply gathered his things, stood up, and shuffled toward the door. Something in Alina stirred. She wanted to say something, to stand up for him, but the words felt stuck in her throat. She glanced around the cafe, at the other patrons who were oblivious to the man's plight. Her heart ached for him, but it also ached for herself. As the door swung shut behind the man, Alina's gaze lingered on the empty chair he had vacated. The world outside felt just as unforgiving for both of them, two people lost in their own struggles, seeking a place to belong. As the door clicked shut behind the homeless man, Alina's eyes followed him for a moment before she turned back to her half-empty cup. The tension in her chest grew heavier. Something about the interaction didn't sit right. Her gaze flicked back to the man, who had stopped for a moment outside the cafe, clearly deciding where to go next. Before she could think, the words came out of her mouth. "Excuse me," she called softly, almost unsure if she was being heard. Victor turned, surprise flickering across his tired face. His eyes were dark, but there was a softness to them, as if he carried years of experience with people who overlooked him. "Yeah." Alina hesitated for a moment. She wasn't sure why she was doing this, why she felt compelled to reach out, but the emptiness inside her urged her to take action. "Why don't you come sit with me for a bit? I'll buy you something to eat." Victor blinked, his expression unreadable for a beat, then nodded slowly. "All right." He walked back into the cafe, and Alina moved to an empty table by the window, trying to ignore the pounding in her chest. She wasn't sure if this was a foolish act of kindness, or if she was just looking for some connection in a world that felt increasingly distant. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that it was what she needed. As Victor sat across from her, she noticed his hands were worn, his face lined with stories he might never share. The waitress quickly brought over a simple meal, sandwiches, some soup, and placed them between them on the table. Alina made sure to pour a cup of water for Victor, pushing it gently toward him. "I wasn't sure if you were hungry," she said, a bit embarrassed. Victor gave her a soft smile, though it didn't reach his eyes completely. "I'm always hungry," he said quietly, then paused. "But it's not just for food." Alina looked at him, unsure how to respond. The weight of his words hung in the air for a long moment, and then she asked, "What do you mean?" Victor took a long drink of water before answering. "Hunger's a lot more than just the stomach. Sometimes you're starving for something deeper, a connection maybe, or a reason to keep going." Alina couldn't look away from him. His words struck her in a way she hadn't expected. She had been so consumed with her own grief, so caught up in the pain of losing her mother, that she hadn't thought much about the hunger for anything beyond survival. She nodded, her throat tightening. "I think I understand." Victor's eyes softened, and for a moment, it felt like they were two people who had both been overlooked in different ways. "Grief makes you feel alone," he said, "like you're the only one carrying it. But the truth is, it doesn't last forever. Even when you think it will. Alina swallowed hard. His words were simple but profound, and they settled deep inside her. She'd been grieving her mother, but perhaps there was more she needed to understand about herself, about the possibility of second chances. Alina stirred her coffee absently, listening as Victor finished the last bite of his sandwich. The conversation had left her feeling oddly grounded, like something inside her had shifted. But just as she started to relax, a chill ran through her. She noticed a barista whispering to another behind the counter, both casting glances in their direction. One of them rolled her eyes. She tried to ignore it, but the murmurs kept coming. A group of customers sitting nearby gave her sideways looks, their disapproval not even subtle. Alina's face flushed, heat crawling up her neck. She had expected judgment, maybe discomfort, but the cold stares still stung. Then came a voice she recognized, sharp and laced with faux sweetness. "Alina Matthews? Is that really you?" She turned slowly to see Rachel Simmons, an old co-worker from the hospital, standing a few feet away, dressed in designer scrubs and holding a coffee like it was a trophy. Rachel's gaze flicked between Alina and Victor before her smile turned into a smirk. "Wow, from nurse of the month to lunch dates with street people? That's quite the fall." Victor stiffened, but Alina raised a hand slightly, signaling him to stay calm. Her stomach twisted, but she forced herself to meet Rachel's gaze. "He's not a street person. He's a human being." Rachel's eyebrows lifted in mock surprise. "Sure, whatever helps you sleep at night." Alina stood up, her heart pounding. "You have no idea what I've been through. And even if you did, mocking someone's worst day says a lot more about you than it does about me." A hush fell over the surrounding tables. Rachel's smirk faltered, and she turned away with a scoff. Alina grabbed her coat and bag, throat tight, emotions churning. She felt like she had just ripped open wounds she hadn't even realized were still bleeding. She glanced back at Victor. He looked up at her with something close to admiration. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "I know," she murmured, "but I couldn't just sit there." Victor nodded. "Most people do." She smiled faintly, but the sting of humiliation lingered. "I should go," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Take care of yourself, okay?" Victor gave her a small salute, his smile genuine now. "You too, Nurse Matthews." She chuckled despite herself and turned to leave, not looking back this time. As she stepped outside, the cold air slapped her skin, and she exhaled deeply, trying to gather herself. The encounter had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. A few minutes later, as she crossed the street, a strange feeling settled over her. She glanced back toward the cafe, expecting somehow to see Victor still sitting there, but the seat was empty. He was gone. The morning light crept through the blinds, brushing across Alina's face as she stirred beneath the covers. Her body ached from restless sleep, her mind still weighed down by everything that had happened the day before. She hadn't been able to stop thinking about Victor, his words, his sudden disappearance, the judgmental stares. It had all left her rattled and more alone than ever. She sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes. Her apartment was still and quiet, the hum of the radiator the only sound. With a sigh, she swung her legs over the edge of the bed and reached for her phone. No messages, no missed calls, just silence. She was beginning to wonder if the entire cafe moment had been some kind of strange dream. But then, something caught her attention, a flicker of movement through the blinds. She froze. A sleek, black limousine was parked right outside her building. The kind you only saw in movies or on rare glimpses downtown when VIPs were in town. It gleamed in the early sunlight, spotless and still. Alina frowned, her heart picking up pace. She lived on a quiet side street. Nobody who drove something like that would have business here. Curiosity won over caution, and she moved toward the window, peeking through the blinds. A suited man stood beside the limo, crisp and composed, holding a small envelope in one gloved hand. She backed away slowly, pulse fluttering. Was this some sort of mistake? Before she could talk herself out of it, a firm knock echoed at her door. She jumped. 3 precise knocks. Not hurried, not hesitant. Alina wrapped herself in her robe and crept to the door, hesitating before peering through the peephole. The same suited man from the street stood there, expression unreadable. She opened the door just a crack. "Can I help you?" The man nodded politely and extended the envelope. "Miss Alina Matthews?" She hesitated. "Yes, this is for you." He handed her the envelope with gloved fingers. "Transportation is ready when you are." "Transportation to where?" she asked, bewildered. He simply gave a slight nod. "You'll find the information inside." With that, he stepped back and returned to stand by the limo. Alina stared down at the envelope in her hands. Her name was handwritten across the front in elegant script. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single ivory card with embossed lettering. "Miss Matthews, you are cordially invited. Your presence is requested. No obligations, only curiosity. Ross. No last name, no explanation, just a signature that felt more like a riddle. She read the card again, her breath catching in her throat. The paper felt heavy, expensive, far too deliberate to be a prank. She looked back out the window at the limo waiting patiently below. Questions spun in her mind. Who was Ross? How did they know her? And why now? Whatever the answer, something had begun. And she wasn't sure if she should be afraid or intrigued. The ride was silent, smooth, and surreal. Alina sat in the back seat of the limo, hands clasped tightly in her lap as the city slowly gave way to winding roads and tree-lined hills. The driver said nothing, his eyes fixed ahead, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the soft hum of classical music playing through hidden speakers. She changed quickly before coming down. Something simple but presentable, though nothing in her closet felt right for whatever this was. Her mind raced with possibilities, questions piling one on top of the other. Why had she accepted? Maybe it was the strangeness of it all, or maybe she was just tired of saying no to the unknown. After nearly an hour, the car turned onto a private road flanked by tall pines. At the end sat a stunning building, modern but warm, with stone walls, tall glass windows, and carefully manicured gardens. It looked more like a retreat than a clinic. Alina stepped out slowly, her breath catching as she took it in. A woman in a pale uniform greeted her with a kind smile and led her through the entrance. The air inside smelled faintly of lavender and something sharper, sterile but not cold. They moved past patients quietly reading or walking with therapists. Everything was calm, polished, serene. Eventually, she was shown into a room with floor-to-ceiling windows and soft leather chairs. A man stood by the window, hands folded behind his back. He turned as she entered. "Miss Matthews," he said, voice warm and composed. "I'm Dr. Hadley Ross." Alina froze. "You're Ross? The one who sent the invitation?" He nodded and motioned to a seat. "Please make yourself comfortable. I imagine you have questions." She sat cautiously, still clutching her bag. "This is a clinic?" "Yes, a very private one. We focus on mental health, healing, and reintegration for those who've lost their way, or those who've helped others find theirs." She blinked. "I'm not sure I understand why I'm here." Dr. Ross smiled gently. "Yesterday, you showed compassion to someone everyone else dismissed. That man, Victor, is not homeless. Not in the way most assume." Alina's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "He's one of our anonymous observers. Individuals who live on the fringe to quietly assess humanity's response when no one's watching. He's been doing it for years." She stared at him, stunned. "You're saying I was being tested?" "Not tested," Ross replied. "Observed. We don't orchestrate these encounters. We simply pay attention when they happen. And when someone chooses kindness without reward, we take notice." Alina leaned back, overwhelmed. The cafe, the conversation, the stares. It all replayed in her mind under a new, surreal light. Dr. Ross watched her carefully. "You did something rare, Miss Matthews. Something we think matters." She swallowed hard. "What happens now?" Ross didn't answer right away. He simply offered a quiet smile. "That's up to you." Alina sat in the soft leather chair, still trying to process everything Dr. Ross had just said. The room was so quiet she could hear the gentle ticking of a clock on the far wall. Her thoughts felt scattered, unreal, like she'd stepped into someone else's story. "So, Victor wasn't homeless?" she asked finally, her voice hesitant. "He lives among the unhoused by choice," Ross replied, his tone gentle but certain. "He's part of a program we've cultivated over the years. We call them observers. People who give up comfort to experience the world from its harshest edges, to see who looks away, who steps up, and who listens." Alina let that settle in. "And you're telling me he chose to talk to me because he thought I'd show him compassion?" Ross smiled. "No, he didn't expect anything. That's what makes it meaningful. He approached because you didn't look away. You sat down beside him when the world had written him off. That moment wasn't planned. It was real." She looked down at her hands, remembering the warmth of the soup between them, the weariness in Victor's eyes. "I didn't do anything special. I just didn't want him to eat alone." "Exactly," Ross said. "And that instinct is what brought you here." Alina raised her eyes. "Why? What do you want from me?" Ross reached into a drawer and pulled out a small folder. He slid it across the table toward her. "I want to offer you something. Position here, at the clinic." Her eyes widened. "A job?" "Not just a job," he said, his voice deepening with meaning. "A mission." Alina opened the folder slowly. Inside was a letter with her name printed at the top. Beneath it, a detailed role description, a generous salary, and a handwritten note from Ross himself. "We believe in kindness when no one's watching. You lived that belief." "I don't understand," she murmured. "I was let go from my last job. I wasn't even at my best." "Exactly," Ross said. "You were grieving, exhausted, but your heart still knew what was right. We don't need perfect people, Alina. We We need people who choose humanity, especially when it's hard. She stared at the papers, heart pounding. What would I even do here? Counsel, care, listen. Sometimes just be present. This place is filled with people trying to find their way back to themselves. You could help guide them. Alina felt something shift inside her, a flicker of purpose in the fog that had clouded her since her mother's passing. But why me? She whispered. Ross leaned forward, his gaze steady. Because when no one was watching, you chose compassion. And that choice changed everything. For the first time in weeks, Alina didn't feel like she was drifting. She felt chosen, seen, and maybe, just maybe, needed. Alina stood by the tall window of the guest suite they'd given her at the clinic. The sun was beginning to set, casting long golden shadows over the hills. In her hands, the offer letter felt heavier than paper should. Ross's words still echoed in her mind, but her heart was tangled in something deeper, grief that hadn't loosened its grip. She traced her fingers along the windowsill and whispered, "I don't know if I'm ready." Later that evening, she found herself in the garden behind the main building. The air was cool, scented with rosemary and lavender. Maya, one of the clinic's senior counselors, was watering a row of herbs when she noticed Alina. "Can't sleep?" Maya asked gently, setting the watering can aside. Alina gave a small smile. "Haven't tried yet." Maya nodded. "Want to walk?" They strolled slowly down the gravel path, the sound of their footsteps crunching beneath them. Alina hesitated before speaking. "My mother passed away a few months ago," she said quietly. "Cancer. It was fast. I barely had time to say goodbye." Maya stayed silent, letting her continue. "I threw myself into work. I thought helping others would help me cope, but I kept messing up, forgetting things, zoning out. I made one mistake too many, and they let me go. I didn't fight it. Part of me felt like I deserved it." Maya stopped walking. "Why would you think that?" Alina's voice wavered. "Because I wasn't enough. Not for her. Not for my patients. I didn't save anyone." Maya reached out and gently touched her arm. "Alina, grief isn't something we perform through achievement. It's something we live through, feel through. You weren't supposed to save everyone. You were supposed to survive it." Alina looked down, eyes glistening. "But I haven't. Not really. You've been punishing yourself," Maya said softly, "for not being perfect, for hurting. But your pain doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means carrying love forward." They stood in silence for a while, letting the words settle like mist on the grass. Maya eventually gave her a hug and left her to wander back alone. That night, sleep came slowly. But when it did, Alina dreamed. She was back in her childhood home, in the kitchen filled with warmth and the smell of cinnamon. Her mother stood at the counter, wearing her favorite apron, smiling softly. "You're stronger than you know, sweetheart," her mother said, reaching out to brush a tear from Alina's cheek. "But it's time. You've held onto the pain long enough." Alina's throat tightened. "I miss you. I know," her mother whispered, "but I'm still with you, just not where you're looking. Move forward, Lina. It's okay." When Alina woke, the early morning light was breaking over the hills. Her pillow was damp with tears, but her chest felt just a little lighter. For the first time in a long while, she was ready to take a breath without guilt. Alina stood before the glass doors of Dr. Ross's office, heart steady, decision made. The sunlight streaming through the clinic's high windows cast long, clean lines across the floor, as if drawing a path forward. She took a breath, squared her shoulders, and knocked twice. "Come in," came Ross's voice. Inside, he was reviewing something on his tablet, but looked up immediately when she entered. "Alina," he said with a calm smile, "how are you feeling?" "Grounded," she replied, "and ready. I want to accept your offer." A flicker of satisfaction crossed Ross's face. He set the tablet aside. "I'm glad to hear that. We believe in your potential." "There's something I need to say first," she continued, walking over to the chair across from him. "I'm honored by the opportunity, but I won't take the role unless I can do it my way." Ross arched an eyebrow. "I'm listening. I want to lead outreach programs," she said, voice firm. "We're in a clinic hidden in the hills. That's fine for the elite, but there are people like Victor everywhere who are forgotten. I want to build bridges, mobile clinics, mental health services, safe zones, real support." Ross steepled his fingers. "You want to change the scope. I want to change the soul," Alina replied. "Dignity first care, regardless of status. If we're assessing humanity, let's meet it where it's struggling, not just where it's already healing." The room fell quiet for a moment. Ross studied her, eyes unreadable. Then slowly he leaned back in his chair. "You're not just here to join us," he said. "You're here to reshape us." "I'm not trying to be difficult," Alina said quickly, nervous now. He shook his head. "You're being principled. That's exactly why we wanted you. Too many people come in asking what they'll gain. You came in asking what you could change." Alina let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "I'll approve your proposal personally," Ross said. "You'll have a dedicated team to start the groundwork. Of course, it won't be easy. There will be resistance, even internally. She nodded. I'm not afraid of that. Good, he said, offering his hand. Welcome aboard, Alina. Their handshake sealed more than a contract. It marked the beginning of something bigger. As she left the office, her footsteps felt lighter than they had in months. The grief still lingered, but now it shared space with something else. Purpose. She wandered down the main hallway, passing the nurse's lounge and the community garden windows. Everything felt new, not because the building had changed, but because she had. By the time she stepped outside, the sun had lifted higher in the sky. A breeze rustled the treetops. She closed her eyes and let it wash over her. For the first time since her mother's passing, Alina wasn't running from the past. She was walking toward the future on her own terms. The city looked different now. Maybe it was the way Alina saw it, through purpose instead of pain. Or maybe it was the early morning light, casting a golden hue over cracked sidewalks and weathered buildings. She stepped out of the mobile clinic van, stretching her arms, the scent of coffee and dew clinging to the air. Volunteers were already unloading supplies. Blankets, hygiene kits, pre-packed lunches. A small line had formed, people waiting not just for help, but for a moment of dignity. Alina scanned the crowd, then stopped. There he was, Victor. He wasn't slouched beneath a tattered coat or avoiding eye contact anymore. He wore a clean polo shirt and jeans, a volunteer badge clipped neatly to his chest. He was handing out care kits with calm assurance, laughing softly with an elderly woman in line. He looked free. Alina walked over, heart thudding. Morning, she said gently. Victor turned, his face lighting up with recognition. Well, if it isn't my cafe companion, he grinned. She smiled. Didn't expect to see you here. I've been coming every week, he said. Turns out when someone believes in you, it's contagious. I wanted to pass it on. They shared a quiet nod, no need to say more. The morning moved quickly. Alina checked vitals, cleaned wounds, referred people to safe shelters. The makeshift clinic was set up in an abandoned lot, but it felt like sacred ground. Not because of its location, but because of what it offered, compassion without conditions. Over here, called Maya, waving her over from the far end of the tent. A group of students stood beside her, nervously clutching clipboards and boxes of supplies. They're mine, Maya said proudly. Future nurses. I thought they should see the world beyond textbooks. Alina grinned. Baptism by fire, huh? They're nervous, but they'll be fine. You changed me, Alina. It's only fair I pass it down. One student stepped forward. Are you the one who started this outreach program? Alina looked around at the bustling scene. Victor helping someone with a walker, Maya guiding a student through wound care, laughter echoing from the food tent. No, she said softly. This started long before me. I just listened to the right people. The student smiled, inspired. By early afternoon, the crowds thinned. Alina stood beside Victor, sipping cold water, sweat dampening her collar. You really built something, he said. We built it, she corrected. You being here, it matters more than you know. Victor looked out at the quiet street. Funny, isn't it? I used to think I was invisible. Now I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Alina nodded, watching the city breathe. She didn't know what challenges tomorrow would bring, but today was full, real, worthwhile, and she wasn't walking alone anymore. The cafe was exactly the same. Same smudged windows catching morning light, same chip tiles on the floor, same dusty corner booth near the radiator where it had all started. But Alina wasn't the same. She sat with her back straight, her scrubs replaced by a crisp navy blouse, a soft scarf wrapped around her neck. Her hair was up, not out of exhaustion, but intention. Confidence lived in her now. She stirred her coffee slowly, watching the street outside bustle with life. Across from her sat a worn leather bag filled with paperwork from the clinic, progress reports, grant applications, volunteer lists. A small smile played on her lips. She didn't need to rush today. Excuse me, sir, said a sharp voice nearby. You can't sit here. Customers only. Alina looked up. Near the entrance stood a man with hollow cheeks and dirt-streaked hands. His coat was more holes than fabric, and his shoes were two different sizes. A waitress stood between him and the booths, her arms crossed tightly, eyes cold with judgment. Alina rose. Her chair scraped the floor lightly as she stepped over, gently placing a hand on the waitress's arm. He's with me, she said softly but firmly. Please bring another coffee, and maybe a muffin if he'd like one. The waitress blinked, startled, unsure how to respond. But Alina's calm, steady presence made resistance feel silly. With a quick nod, she turned away toward the counter. The man looked confused, as if he wasn't sure he'd heard right. Are you sure? He asked. Alina smiled. Completely. She led him to her table, helping him lower into the seat across from her. He glanced around nervously, still waiting for someone to yell. Relax, she said, pouring him a glass of water. You're not the first person person I've invited to sit here. He gave a short, broken laugh. Well, lucky me. They sat in silence for a moment. Then the man leaned forward, eyes searching hers. Why'd you do it? He asked. You don't even know me. Alina paused, choosing her words with care. Because someone once did it for me, she said. And it changed everything. The waitress returned, setting down the coffee and muffin with less frost this time. The man muttered thanks, eyes wide with disbelief. He sipped slowly, savoring each drop. You a nurse or something? He asked. I used to be, Alina said with a quiet smile. Now I help people in different ways. He nodded, chewing slowly. Outside, the city moved on. Cars honking, children laughing, wind brushing fallen leaves down the sidewalk. Inside, Alina leaned back and watched him eat, warmth blooming in her chest. This wasn't a rescue, it was recognition. And as the cafe's doorbell jingled behind another customer entering, Alina felt something deep and certain settle inside her. She had come full circle, and she was exactly where she was meant to be. If this story touched your heart, let us know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories just like this one.